Well, last time we welcomed him on the podcast, Kenny Albert was kind of waiting to see what sports would be going on, how they would do it. And Kenny, you've been doing games now since what, July, like when sports kicked back up. And when we left off, Kenny Albert, we talked about what was next. And so tell us a little bit, first of all, your journey doing sports in 2020 into 2021.
Well, Alex, first of all, it's great to be with you again. We've kept in contact over the last year or so since we did that podcast, and great to hear and see that you're doing well. Since we last chatted, it's certainly been an interesting time. I went to the NHL bubble in Edmonton last August and worked over 30 games during the playoffs in that bubble, and then came back to the United States in early September, worked the NFL season, the NFL on Fox, and then in January, when the NHL started up again, my regular duties with the Rangers radio crew, with NBC Hockey, and then filled in on a bunch of Knicks television games as well for MSG. Now, what was different this year was we did not travel very much for the away games. For the Rangers and the Knicks, we did the away games out of studios in New York, the TV studios across the street from MSG, radio studios up in the 60s uptown. With NBC, I did travel for some games during the regular season, but many others we broadcasted out of the studios in Stamford, Connecticut. Now that we're into the deep into the NHL playoffs, we have been traveling for the most part. In the first round, it was a combination of travel and games out of the studio, but then in the second round, I was between Las Vegas and Denver for a couple of weeks, and now I'm down in Tampa for the Lightning Islanders series.
Well, let's hit that in a second. But national versus local, I know it was probably different then, right? Because local, they kind of had more restrictions on the broadcast crew this team, travel-wise and whatnot.
Well, most of the teams in professional sports and the networks decided for a number of reasons not to travel the broadcasters to the away games, and we've seen that in hockey, basketball, football, and baseball. And I know now some of them are starting to travel. Some of the baseball crews, I know the Islanders radio announcers are down here in Tampa, so it has opened up a little bit. But it was for a combination of reasons. Health and safety protocol obviously at the top of the list. Less people traveling kept everybody healthier and safer. And it was also a financial decision as far as saving money on the flights and the hotel rooms and the television trucks and facilities. And it was just a lot easier to have everybody stay in their home city and broadcast the games off the monitors.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Kenny is one of the only broadcasters broadcast all four sports, and I'm so honored that I get to know him and call him a friend. Kenny, that means so much. But you just mentioned the Islanders a minute ago. I've been reading a book by Rudy Rudiger, Rudy from Notre Dame.
Yep.
He's talking about finding their inner Rudy. Isn't this Islanders team a bit like Rudy? Like they're sort of the underdogs here, and yet they're coming out swinging, man. They're looking pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alex. And you look at what they've done over the last 2 years, making it to the Eastern Conference Final last year by defeating Philadelphia in Game 7 in the second round, and then ultimately they lost to Tampa Bay in 6 games. And then yesterday, starting their third straight series on the road, they fell behind 2-1 in each of their first 2 series against Pittsburgh and Boston. Started both those series on the road, and down here in Tampa, pulled out a 2-1 victory in Game 1. And you just have to be impressed with their resiliency, playing against these top teams. I mentioned the Penguins and the Bruins, and now the Lightning. The style they play under head coach Barry Trotz and general manager Lou Lamoriello. They have great goaltending. You look at their group of defensemen, and the sum is probably greater than the parts if you look at them individually. And then just the style of hockey they play up front, and they're so disciplined. Tampa Bay has the best power play in the league during the playoffs at over 40%, and the Islanders stayed out of the box. They took only 2 yesterday. Tampa Bay did score late on one of the power plays with the goalie pulled, so it was a 6-on-4. But very impressed with what we saw from the Islanders in Game 1.
And firstly, congratulations getting the call on that on NBC for this series. That must mean a lot to you. And calling the games for the Rangers and locally, you obviously called the Islanders. So did you see this was a possibility for them even in the regular season?
Sure. I think when Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz took over, it just changed the culture. And to look at the success they've had they had won only one playoff series in the last 20 years prior to the Lamoriello-Trotz tandem getting hired by the Islanders ownership. And now they've won 6 series in the last 3 years. So you can just see it developing over the 3 years, and certainly impressed with what they did during the regular season. It was a tough division with Boston and Pittsburgh and Washington and the Rangers and Philadelphia. And, those top 4 teams all finished, so close to one another. And the Islanders wound up in 4th place. They were only a couple of points out of first. And like I said, they started both series on the road in Pittsburgh and Boston. They won Game 1 in Pittsburgh in overtime. They lost Game 1 in Boston, but they came back to win Game 2 in overtime and ultimately won both series in 6 games.
Kenny, I got to ask you this, because you're a hockey, you've been around the game for so long. You're now going to call a couple games at the Coliseum. And maybe the last time, we don't know, but what's that feeling going to be like? Well, are you excited to do that? I mean, it's the barn, it's the Coliseum, it's the last year.
I'm really looking forward to it, Alex. I grew up on Long Island, so I went to a lot of Islander games. And during my professional career, most of the games that I've attended and worked at the Coliseum have been against the Rangers. So it's always such a great atmosphere, always sold out, even when the Islanders had some down years. So it's just a great experience. It has that intimate feeling. It's a smaller building. Even up in the press box, you feel like you're so close to the ice because of the overhang and the way it's set up. So, and I actually, this is a little known fact, Alex, the first NHL game that I called was actually an Islander game. It was on the road in Winnipeg back in 1989, but I was hired to fill in on 4 Islanders radio games during that 89-90 season. So, spent a lot of time at the Coliseum, did a couple of games there with color analyst Bobby Nystrom at the time. So I definitely have fond memories of calling games at the Coliseum and attending games during my youth and my high school and college years.
I was going to say, so the memories will probably be flowing for you, because of the 80s, right? You had the Nystrom years, the Gillies. I mean, that's going to probably be hitting you while you're doing these games. Who knows?
Absolutely. I was not an Islander fan back then in the early 80s, even though I grew up on the island. Believe it or not, I was a Vancouver Canucks fan, which I can't even tell you how that started, but I was a Canucks fan from a young age. And I was actually there when the Islanders beat Vancouver in the final in 82. But I have so much respect for those Islander teams. 4th grade Cup, I was in junior high school, middle school at the time, and I had so many friends who were Islander fans. And looking back, obviously among the greatest teams of all time, that Islander dynasty, and so many Hall of Fame players, and I've gotten to know a lot of them. I worked with Bobby Nystrom. I worked games with Dennis Potvin. So they're all great guys, and always fun to hear them reminisce about that cup run back from 80 to 83. And also in 79, I was at a number of the games when they played the Rangers, who defeated them in 6 to go on to the Stanley Cup final against Montreal. So that was a tremendous series to be able to, watch in person as well back in 79.
And Kenny, calling the Ranger Islander games, I mean, it'll be a different place, but how's the atmosphere been for you when you call those games on the island, specifically, because it is the last year there? What was the energy like this year?
Well, we weren't in the building this year, unfortunately. We did the away games from the studio in Manhattan, so did not have the opportunity to call the Ranger Islander games in person on Long Island this year. We did the ones at the Garden in person. But I was at the Coliseum for 2 games this year, a regular season game against Buffalo with no fans in the building, which was obviously bizarre, as it was calling games at MSG with no fans. And then I worked Game 4 of the Pittsburgh series on NBC. So the building was about half full that day, and they were loud. They were great. There was definitely the crowd definitely had an effect on the game and on the teams that day. So it'll be even they'll have even more of an effect when we get in there this Thursday and Saturday for games 3 and 4, because there'll be more people in the building
and
than there were for that 4th game against Pittsburgh.
Imagine they go in 2-0. I mean, that's very unlikely because it's Tampa Bay, but imagine they go in that place 2-0. The roof's gonna fall off, it feels like. So who knows?
Yeah, but, it'll be wild either way. I mean, at worst they'll come back 1-1, so it'll just be an unbelievable atmosphere there on Thursday night.
Oh, I was saying if they go 1-1, that's great, but they had to take yesterday, right? That was kind of the marker for them. If they didn't do that, who knew what would happen the rest of the series? Would you agree with that?
You know, you never know in these long playoff series. I mean, I worked the Vegas-Colorado series, and Colorado won the first game 7-1 and wound up losing the series in 6 games. So,
Kenny, that was a roller coaster to cover,
yeah,
wasn't it?
Vegas had gone 7 in the first round. They had traveled, so they were at a bit of a disadvantage prior to that game one. I think, you know, from the Islanders and Lightning standpoint yesterday, both teams were well rested. The Islanders won their series in 6 last Wednesday, and the Lightning had won their series in 5 games against Carolina. So both teams were well rested. It's interesting. They hadn't played each other all year due to the divisional setup this season. So the last time the Islanders and Lightning actually saw each other in person was 9 months ago, last September, when they played Game 6 in the bubble in the Eastern Conference Final.
Well, real quickly, Vegas and Montreal, I mean, that's going to be a barn burner if you think about it, because both teams, as you say, have so much momentum going into it.
That should be an absolutely tremendous series. I just watched the last 6 Vegas games in person, and that series, Vegas-Colorado, that could have been a semifinal or even a Stanley Cup final. Those two teams finished with the most points in the NHL, 82 apiece during the regular season. Unfortunately, they're in the same division, so this year they had to play in the second round of the playoffs, but you know, one of them had to lose, and Vegas moves on. And you know, you look at them right now as certainly a co-favorite, I would think, to win the cup. But Montreal's on fire. They've won 7 straight games. The sweep of Winnipeg. They came back to win the last 3 from Toronto. They have an outstanding goaltender in Carey Price. They made a coaching change during the regular season. They signed a number of veterans, brought in a number of veterans, Tyler Toffoli and Eric Stahl, just to name a few. Corey Perry, who's won a Stanley Cup. All 3 of those guys have won cups, and then they've added youth with Cole Caulfield coming out of the University of Wisconsin. So they just seem to be on one of those magical runs.
Well, we'll have to see. Kenny, I also got you on to thank you for a couple of things. Last time I had you on, I don't think I mentioned to my audience that you had my dad and I up in the broadcast booth with you and Dave Maloney against the Boston Bruins in the Ranger game, and I want to say thank you for that. That was an incredible – I mean, the Bruins came back, but it was just a good experience to be with you guys, so thank you for that.
Well, it was a memorable night for us as well. Thanks for visiting. And you mentioned Dave Maloney, my tremendous radio partner, the former captain of the Rangers, and he's actually down here working the Islanders Tampa Bay series on national radio. So I had a chance to visit with Dave and spend some time yesterday, but it was always great whenever you came up to visit.
And then now you and the Islanders have something else in common. You both support the Henry Viscardi School, and you mentioned the 80s, you know, Nystrom and Gillies would always come out to support the Viscardi School. But thank you for taking some time out this year to a virtual sports night. What was that like? And just give me a little insight into that, because that looked pretty cool when I saw the presentation of it.
Well, Alex, you know, as you know, and we've spent a lot of time together through the years at Sports Night at the Viscardi Center. It's always one of my favorite nights of the year. I've been very fortunate to be invited out now over the last 15 to 20 years, and always great, obviously, in person before the pandemic to attend. And unfortunately, my schedule the last few years, it's fallen during the Stanley Cup playoffs, so I haven't been able to attend for the last 3 or 4 years. But a big supporter, obviously, and this year was honored when they asked me to be the host of the virtual event. So I actually went out to Albertson, Long Island in late April or early May, and they have a terrific setup there, the studio, the broadcast facility. So spent a couple of hours and recorded the, you know, all of the different segments, and it was just a lot of fun. And like I said, a great cause and a huge honor to be involved and to have been invited for the last 20 years or so.
Well, always thank you for that time. And yeah, I mean, we expanded beyond that, which is even more cool because we see each other at all the other games. So it's always been fun having this friendship. Kenny, I got to say about your dad retiring, I mean, any thoughts on that? I mean, this is a big moment for that right now as well.
Well, I'm not sure I ever thought he would actually retire. I figured he would work forever, but he feels it's the right time. He was able to work a Knicks-Atlanta game in the first round, his final game at Madison Square Garden, where he worked for close to 40 years, and he'll continue to work the NBA playoffs through the end of this second round and then the Eastern Conference Finals. So going out on his terms, decided it was time, and like I said, I never thought he would actually utter the word retire. But
clearly it's been a big family gathering for you guys every year, so even though he was on the road for all those years, he kept the family together, which has been great to see. And obviously, you've become a broadcaster as well, which is pretty awesome, I'm sure, in your own right as well. Hey,
well, I joke, Alex. I joke that when I was growing up on Long Island, whenever my uncles, Al and Steve, would come over, who were also long-time play-by-play broadcasters, I would sit around and listen to the stories, and I joked that was like the first all-sports radio station back in the 70s and early 80s. I would just soak it all in via osmosis and listen to their stories about the various games they worked and the teams they were around and the players. So just great memories.
Well, one more thing. I can't let you go without talking about the Knicks because you did obviously see that series, but you covered them over the year. Can we see, is this just the start of something that could even be Islander-esque where they keep elevating every playoff year?
Yeah, I think so. It was such a special season for the Knicks, winning over 40 games. And I kind of see some similarities in Barry Trotz and Tom Thibodeau, both tremendous head coaches. Thibodeau won the NBA Coach of the Year. Just his principles of teamwork and defense and hard work. I've known Barry Trotz for 30 years. I don't know Thibodeau very well. It's just observing, from the outside, they do have a lot of similar traits. And the Knicks have a tremendous management team with Leon Rose and William Wesley and Scott Perry right on down and to the coaching staff. So I think this is just the start of something very special.
And the last time we had you on, I think they had just hired Rose a couple weeks prior. So it's perfect timing then, and it's perfect timing now to get you on and enjoy calling the rest of the series. We'll be watching you. Islanders Lightning on NBC.
Alex, really appreciate it. Look forward to Game 2 tomorrow here in Tampa, and then getting back to the Coliseum for Games 3 and 4. Hope we can do this again soon, and always appreciate your support, and good luck with everything going on with your career.
Thank you. Well, we're moving along here, and thank you for always wanting to be part of this and making time. So I'm very appreciative, Kenny, every time we can get to do this. So let's
anytime. My pleasure.
What happens, right?
My pleasure. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Kenny. I'm Alex Garrett, where, of course, we're always adapting. Talk to you soon. Kenny, that was perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.
And hopefully I get to the Coliseum. I don't know what I'm going to do, but hopefully after the Coliseum for one of these games, because it is the last year, and I'm trying to see what's it going to be like trying to get in. So we'll see what happens. But
well, good luck. Keep me posted.
Yeah, I will. And if I'm there, I'll let you know. And
absolutely. Let me know. I'll try to come down and visit at some point before the game, or we're all the way upstairs, but definitely let me know if you're there.
All right, Kenny, we'll do. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Well, Jake Russell of One Block, thank you for doing what you can for your community. Not in our backyard, not in our front yard. We won't accept the trash. We want to clean it up, and at least one organization gets that. Let's hope that continues onward through the city as we are moving post-pandemic. I'm Alex Garrett, where we're always adapting. Talk to you soon.